Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is about 9:13. So hope everyone's doing good. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna go over a buddy's house tonight to watch a movie. We're gonna watch one of the best movies I saw in 2024. A movie that was really under the radar for me, but then I heard from a couple of reliable resources that it was one of the best, if not the best movie of 2024 when it comes to new horror films, and that is Oddity. I did a show on Oddity about probably about a month ago, and that movie is just super awesome and totally original. It's got an old school horror flavor. It's a ghost story. It's got a lot of different things. It's generally scary, super creepy, atmospheric. It's just an awesome movie. One of the best. It might be a close tie. You know, for the best movies that I saw of 2024. With The Substance was my favorite horror film probably for the most part of 2024, which was just an amazing film, and I did a show on that. I also did kind of a top list of 2024, but I saw Oddity after I made that list and I did that video, and I was blown away by it. I got it. I rented it on DVD at Opera House Video. Completely blown away by it, and then I bought it recently. About 2 weeks ago, I bought it on Blu-ray, and I haven't watched it yet on Blu-ray. And I'm gonna watch it with a buddy of mine who I know his taste pretty well. Like we both have a deep love for horror films, and I really think that this kind of the way this film is done, like the style of it, is kind of right in his wheelhouse. Like it's kind of made for him. So I'm really curious to see what he thinks of it. But I'm also really excited to watch it on Blu-ray because I have not watched it yet. So stay tuned for a review for that, and that will probably be happening tomorrow morning, which will be Thursday. So today's Wednesday, and it's 9:15, a little bit early. So yeah, so last night was kind of funny. I was thinking a lot about kind of the big letdown and kind of the disastrous film that was the Wolfman that came out this year. I saw it when it came out, directed and written by Lee Winnell, who I think is a really fantastic director, writer in the world of kind of modern day horror films. With the start to his career, working with James Wan, creating the Saw franchise. He wrote the first couple of films and he starred in the first film. And then eventually he broke away. He still, works in that area, but he kind of broke away and decided to, direct his own films. And so he directed this amazing film, which I've talked a lot about before, Upgrade, which is just an awesome movie and such a great sci-fi kind of body horror film. And then he did a few years back The Invisible Man, which I thought was just an awesome movie. I've done a show on, done a couple of shows I think on that. So I kind of felt, and he's worked with Bloomhouse Studios, run by, of course, Jason Bloom, and they have a really mixed bag of quality in their movies. They yeah, it's all over the place. And some movies are very good. Get Out by Jordan Peele, of course, masterpiece. He's worked with Jordan Peele on many films, and I love Jordan Peele. I think all of his films are just spectacular. But then he also, has worked with David Allen Green, who, of course, relaunched the whole Halloween franchise, which was a disaster, I think, with the exception of Halloween Ends, which I actually really like, and especially the kind of the reboot or reimagining of the Exorcist franchise, which was just god awful. And but at the same time, Blumhouse has done, like I said, some amazing work with Jordan Peele. And they've done some fantastic films like, you know, the Purge franchise, which I love. I'm a huge Purge film fanatic. I love the Purge franchise. I think it's one of the best and one of the most consistent kind of modern day horror franchises, and that's Blumhouse. So it's all over the place for them. So I was really looking forward to Wolfman, and that movie was such a letdown and so underwhelming. One of the biggest disappointments I think of last year of 2024, and I've done a couple of shows on that movie and Lee Winnell, spotlighted his films that I really love. And I think I was so disappointed with The Wolfman that just came out. It came out probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I went with some friends and we saw it opening weekend, and it was just, it was rough. In all honesty, I really love directors who have a real consistent kind of track record. But some directors, all are all over the place. Sometimes they have those really couple of really great films, and then or that one really great film, and then you don't know what the hell happened. The Wachowski brothers, I think, is a perfect example with the Matrix films. I don't they made one spectacular, amazing masterpiece of a film with the Matrix, and then after that, I have no idea what the fuck happened to their career. So that happens, and then you have directors like Martin Scorsese, who's almost in his 90s, and he's still like just kicking ass, left and right. So Tarantino, I think, is another one, but it's a matter of taste. But I like consistency a lot of the times for directors. I'm really attracted to. Of course, I'll love those movies, but I was so disappointed with The Wolfman. It was right up there with the alien film Romulus, which I was really disappointed with. I don't know. That was probably even more of a disappointment for me this year or last year. But those two films, Alien Romulus and The Wolfman, were my two biggest disappointments. And The Wolfman was such an unenjoyable experience that for me, to be honest, I almost feel like it, I don't know, diminishes. I don't put Lee Winnell on that pedestal as high anymore, because I truly don't know what the fuck happened with that film. Like, it just seems, they had some good things going, they had some good concepts, but it just totally went off the rails. And I don't know what happened. It was a real big misfire. So anyway, last night I was thinking about that movie and kind of what a disaster it was. And I love the I love werewolf movies. I love vampire films, of course, and I'm a huge Dracula fan. I just finished reading Bram Stoker's Dracula again, and I absolutely loved Nosferatu by Robert Eggers. I've done multiple shows on that, and I'm more of a, when it comes to vampires or say films about based on the original work by Bram Stoker. I'm more of a Dracula fan. Coppola's version, of course, masterpiece. Frank Langella, all of the Hammer films. The Frank Langella film, of course, is amazing. All of the classic Hammer films, and all there's so many great ones. But the Robert Eggers film for me is kind of the quintessential movie portraying that character or about that character. So and I'm more of a werewolf guy. I love werewolf movies. That's even more of a higher thing for me. The Howling being my favorite werewolf film of all time. Of course, American Werewolf in London, Silver Bullet. I mean, there's so many great. There's nowhere near as many werewolf films compared to vampire films, which is a massive genre. There's like 10,000 or like a million vampire films, and there's also a ton of Dracula films. So in comparison, there's not even I almost think not even half the amount in comparison of werewolf films compared to vampire films or Dracula films. But I love that monster so much. Paul Naschy, again, one of my favorite actors. I'm in the midst of covering a whole bunch of his films. Some of the best some of the best werewolf movies I think that have ever been made were with Paul Naschy. But it's funny. So I was thinking of the Wolfman. So then I've been hearing about it again, and I've seen this movie a couple times, and it's always disappointing. And it's one of those things I just don't know what happened. But it's funny also because in the subsequent months in reviews that I've seen for Lee Whannell's Wolfman, I hear this movie kind of being brought up over and over again, and that there are people out there that actually really like this movie, and that it's kind of gotten this like second life to it, where initially it was a bomb, but people have come around saying, well, it's actually a good movie, it's really good, and it deserves a second chance. And that is the other film called The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt, Hugo Weaving, Max von Sydow. Just a ridiculous cast, like totally insane cast. And this came out in 2010. And again, I've seen this movie a couple times, and I just had so many problems with this movie. But I think it was probably 2 or 3 years ago I snatched this up on Blu-ray, and I haven't watched it since then. But so seeing this movie where people here and there were talking about this movie, and that people were saying, well, this movie's actually pretty good, you should give it a chance. And I heard so many negative reviews, and rightfully so, for Lee Whannell's Wolfman. I mean, the movie, I think they almost did the public a disservice, because I think critics and YouTube people, reviewers, should have gone a little bit harsher on that film. I think they kind of took it easy, but across the board, incredibly negative reviews. But a lot of the times, about 4 or 5 times in these reviews, they were saying, they brought up this movie that came out, The Wolfman, that came out in 2010, and they were saying, oh, in comparison, I think this movie is much better. And and then they were talking about people, kind of coming back to this film, and saying on how it's actually a really great film, and all this stuff. So pretty randomly, I was thinking about that whole thing last night, and I decided to watch it, because I have not watched this on Blu-ray. And there's two versions of this film. I got this. It's actually a pretty nice package. I got this, I think, at Goodwill a few years ago, and I haven't watched it. It's got two versions of the film. There's a Blu-ray version and a DVD version. And on the Blu-ray version, there's a theatrical cut, but then there's also an unrated cut. And I had not seen the unrated cut, so I figured, why not? And I think it's unrated because of the gore factor. This movie is pretty gory, and I think that I could be wrong, but I think there were things cut out of the theatrical version of this because of that, which is totally stupid, but I think that's what happened. So they put out a unrated version that wasn't released in the theaters, that I think is a little bit longer, and quite a bit it's quite a bit more gory and graphic and violent. So I gave this film another chance, and I watched it. And I guess, like, in comparison to Lee Whannell's Wolfman, the biggest problem with that film was it just never really felt like a werewolf movie. It never really felt like it. And I know Lee Winnell had this idea or concept of taking this whole idea of somebody being bitten and turned into a werewolf, like treating it more, you know, as a disease, and that talking about how he had an influence from David Cronenberg, with The Fly, which I could see a little bit in that movie, but it was not executed well at all. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting take, treating this whole kind of metamorphosis of a person turning into a wolf and what have you as like some kind of cancerous sickness, like a cancer, a sickness, a terminal disease. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. That's going to be a different, that's a different take on things, and that could be original. But again, good idea, pretty cool concept, but poorly executed. And the thing about that film is it just never felt like a werewolf movie. It just felt like somebody turning into this kind of rabid creature. But it just never felt like a werewolf movie. And in comparison, I would say this film at least feels to a degree like a werewolf film. It's They tried to really make this into this big, giant, glossy Hollywood budgeted version of the original Universal film, The Wolfman, starring, of course, Lon Chaney Jr. It's pretty much identical, the story and the characters, the whole thing, but it's on steroids. It's got this massive budget. There's so much CGI in this movie. It's like it's kind of insane, but it's basically the same exact story. And and the thing is, I think that with the cast that this movie has, it's an example of like on paper when you assemble like an amazing cast of some of the best actors and actresses around, you assume, okay, this is going to be gold. This is going to be a home run. But most of the time, you know, there most of the time it doesn't work. There has to be chemistry. There has to be good writing. There has to be a good script. There has to be a good chemistry within that cast. Even if you have all these rock stars assembled, if the chemistry's not there, it's not going to work. And that's what happens with this film. I didn't make it all the way through. So I don't understand why people are, and I think it's very, you know, very much in the minority. But I can't understand why people would say that this is actually a good film and that I don't think this movie's even really watchable. Yeah, sure, it feels like a more of a werewolf movie because of, it has a little bit of that mythology tied to it with the full moon, the woods taking place in the forest, silver bullets, all of those things. But the cast, the writing for this movie is so flatline. There's like zero chemistry. There's zero tension. Benicio del Toro, I think, is one of my favorite actors. Emily Blunt is one of my favorite actresses. Hugo Weaving is great. Anthony Hopkins can be really great. Sometimes he's not. But I am a huge Benicio del Toro fan, and he does a pretty good job in this movie. He's kind of one of those actors that he's good in, even in something that is not very good as far as a film. But even that falls short for me. But it's so flat. Like everything is monotone. There's zero excitement. There's zero chemistry within the script. And the thing that is the worst part of this movie is the CGI. We're kind of introduced to the werewolf pretty early on in this film, and I will say there are some pretty awesome gnarly kills in this movie. It's pretty good. In comparison to Lee Winnell's film, it does feel much more like a werewolf movie. It has a little bit more of that obvious classic kind of werewolf aesthetic. and there are some pretty gnarly kills. But the thing that took me out of this movie is the the CGI is just absolutely shit in this movie. That's the only way I can describe it. It's there's so much CGI, and like I said, in the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to the Wolfman very very early, and there's a there's some good, like I said, there's some good violence, there's some good kills, but the CGI is so bad that it's just so unbelievably um, artificial. And you get, I like it when in a monster movie or in horror movies in general, when if there's you're not you're not going to see the monster or the killer in the beginning. You're going to maybe see little aspects of it or little hints of what this creature or monster or slasher killer serial killer might be, or you don't see him at all. There isn't that big giant reveal like 2 minutes into the movie, like, oh, this is who it is, and there's no mystery anymore. I like it when there's things like kind of left in the shadows, and this movie does not do that in any way, shape, or form, because right away, within the first 5 or 10 minutes of this movie, again, it's a kind of a cool scene. It's the kill is actually pretty good, but there's this big reveal of the werewolf, and it's cool until it's not, because you realize right away that this is completely artificial. There's nothing practical about it, and I'm like, okay, so we got 2 hours of this, and I'm like, so I stayed with the movie, and again, it's that same thing. There's one scene in this movie which I think is actually really good, but it's also the CGI is so bad that it kind of makes it unwatchable. The one scene of where Benicio del Toro's character is basically arrested, and he's put in this institution, and then they're accusing him of these murders, and there's this whole big scene of where he's like kind of in this courtroom, and he turns into a werewolf in the courtroom and basically kills everything and everyone in this courtroom. And that scene's pretty intense and it's pretty awesome, but again, it's so the CGI is so shitty. And then he goes after he gets free out of the courtroom, he fully changes into the Wolfman, and he just wreaks hell on England, and he just kills everyone basically. And the idea, the premise is really cool, but there's like zero practical effects. I feel like I'm watching a bad first player video game from like 1998. Like, it's just so artificial, and I'm like, what were they thinking? I'm not like so dead against CGI. I think CGI can be done really well if it's like handled well, where you can blend it with practical effects. You have to have some practical effects. There has to be a tangible, kind of organic environment that the story is set in. But if it doesn't have that, it's just going to be, super bland, and you're never going to be, as a viewer, you're not going to be ever fully absorbed in that movie. I think what Robert Eggers did with Nosferatu was perfect. Like, there's obviously CGI in that film, but there's also a shit ton of practical effects, and he was able to take all of those things and make it seamless. And I think because of the scale of that film with Nosferatu, technically there was limitations to probably what he could do with practical effects, because it's such a like a it's such a grand scale looking kind of a film and story that there obviously will be and probably has to be some CGI. But he did such an impeccable job with blending those things, so it can be done. But with this film, it it just right away there's no element of where you believe anything that you're seeing. Um, and there's like zero practical effects. I don't think there's one scene in this entire movie where there is any actual hands-on effects work. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And to me, that's the biggest part of this movie where it was just an utter disappointment. But the main thing is, again, it's one of those examples where you can assemble the greatest cast on earth, put them in a room, and sell the movie with that alone. But that's not going to work because whoever it is, whoever or what it is, it's still got to be a really great story. It's still got to be effective. There has to be chemistry, and there is none in this movie. And again, I did not. I This is probably my third or fourth time trying to give this movie a chance, and I did not make it all the way through. So at the end of the day, I cannot recommend this movie at all. It's take a hard pass on this movie. It's even in all its Blu-ray glory. And again, this is a very nice edition. I got this at Goodwill a few years ago, and I watched it last night. I'd rented it. I'd seen it on DVD two or three times. I own it on DVD too, and it's incredibly disappointing. I couldn't all the way. The Lee Winnell film, I didn't walk out of. I saw that in a theater, and I didn't walk out of it. I mean, but it dragged ass, and if I was watching it at home by myself, I probably would have shut it off. But this film, The Wolfman, with Benicio del Toro, I couldn't make it all the way through. It's super long too. It drags, and yeah, I would not really even waste my time with this film. And I don't know what people are thinking by saying, "Well, you should give this movie a chance," or "It's actually pretty good." Whatever. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.